Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to the baking sun and baking bricks of ancient Babylon. You're not royalty, you're not a priest, you're a regular person, born to the bottom half of society, probably barefoot, almost certainly sweating, and very likely already late for something. The streets are packed, not with people driving chariots of gold, but with bleating goats, stray dogs, and the rank stench of yesterday's waste baking on the stone. You probably won't survive this, seriously. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake by the end, drop your location and local time in the comment. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes, and immediately regret it. The mud brick walls of your home are already warm, though the sun's barely over the There's no glass on your tiny window, just a woven reed screen meant to keep out dust. It fails. You've inhaled half the Euphrates just rolling over. Outside, the city is a chorus of irritation. Vendors shout in Akkadian, donkeys bray, children scream. Somewhere, someone is banging a pot in a way that feels personal. Your neighbor's privy overflowed again, so you're carefully sidestepping puddles that are definitely not water. Bathing, maybe later. You share a corner of a public courtyard with several families and one unkillable chicken. The closest thing to a shower is a bucket of river water, lukewarm, brownish, and teeming with things that wriggle. Good luck finding soap. Most people scrape themselves clean with oil and a dull blade. Now it's time to make your way through the narrow alleys of baked clay and sharp elbows. You're hungry, but your barley ration ran out 2 days ago, and the market prices have doubled since the last harvest failed. Again, you chew on a dried fig and try not to gag on the sulfur smoke coming from the temple kitchens, where burnt offerings and food preparation somehow coexist in the same fire pit. Historians still argue whether Babylon's city layout was intentionally chaotic or simply a result of millennia of stacking new buildings on top of old ruins. But one thing's for sure: there is no straight path anywhere. You've twisted your ankle 3 times before breakfast just trying to avoid loose bricks, pit toilets, and a goat with territorial issues. As you pass under one of the famous gates, blue glazed and lion decorated, you almost feel inspired. Then someone spits from a balcony. It lands way too close to your head. You keep moving, swatting flies that never seem to die. They cling to your sweat-drenched tunic like it's a luxury fabric. And speaking of clothes, yours smell like every corner of the city because they've never seen proper soap. The laundry woman said she'd boil them next moon. She's said that for the past 3 moons. Fun fact: Babylonian women sometimes used a mixture of ash and oil for hair care. Men, you get nothing. Just dust and tears. You make it to your assigned labor zone near the canal, where your job today is more mud bricks. The irony isn't lost on you. Babylon is a city of bricks. Bricks build the temples, the homes, the roads, and your inevitable tomb if you pass out from dehydration today. The sun is vicious now, boiling the air until the very act of breathing feels like inhaling hot soup. There's no break, no union, no HR, just a foreman with a stick and an incredible capacity for you. You lift, you carry, you bake in your own sweat. Historians estimate that temperatures in Mesopotamia during peak season could hit over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And unlike modern cities, there's no air conditioning, no cold drinks, not even a shady tree that isn't sacred you'd kill for a cucumber. Instead, you get warm beer with a straw poked through the fermentation scum. Somewhere mid-morning, a cart collapses near you. A donkey's leg is caught, and a boy cries out as the bricks smash his toes. No one stops. Accidents are a feature, not a flaw, of life here. You limp away from the mess, counting your own working fingers like a miser. And let's not forget the smell. Babylon is beautiful in poetry, but poetry doesn't capture the raw sewage, rotting meat, incense, and livestock that mingle into something so pungent it might actually have a shape. Oh, and just a heads up, crocodile dung is used in medicine here. You don't know that yet, but someday you might. Maybe as a salve, maybe in your food. It's a surprise. As the sun begins to tilt westward, and the flies multiply in ambition, you drag your aching feet back home, if you can even call it that. Your legs itch from dust, your mouth is dry, and your last sandal broke during a chase from a wild pig that somehow made it into the city again. You made it through your first full morning in Babylon, barely. You're back out the next morning, and your body already hates you. Every joint groans, like it's made of unlubricated door hinges. But that doesn't matter. because today isn't a Labor Day, it's Paperwork Day, which sounds restful, until you remembered that Babylonian paperwork is made of clay and rage. You arrive at the temple administration quarter, a cluster of slightly more intact mud brick buildings looming like exhausted giants. This is where taxes are assessed, marriages are recorded, lawsuits are filed, debts are measured, and dreams come to die. Welcome to the bureaucracy of Babylon. Everything runs through the scribes. They sit cross-legged on woven mats, surrounded by clay tablets and styluses. Not pen, little reed sticks that they press into soft clay with infinite seriousness. The tablets dry in the sun, and if you're lucky, your message survives. If you're not, it's eaten by a goat. That happens more often than you'd think. You're here because last week a priest claimed you underpaid your barley tax. You remember paying, you definitely remember paying, but unfortunately, the scribe forgot to bake the receipt tablet. That means your record was erased by yesterday's drizzle, and now it's your word against the temple's spoiler. The temple wins. The head scribe sighs dramatically when you plead your case. He lifts one eyebrow with the weariness of a man who has had to listen to people all day, but cannot legally throw clay at them. He offers to recalculate your debt. For a small bribe, you don't have a bribe. So he recalculates your debt by doubling it. The math checks out. According to him, historians still argue whether this system was intentionally opaque or just badly organized over centuries of accumulated rules. Either way, you're now legally in debt to the temple granary, which means you'll probably be hauling grain sacks on off days for the next 3 months. Hope your spine likes that idea. You trudge outside to the public square where the judgment stone sits. People are gathered, men in long fringed tunics, women in layered shawls. A loud man is screaming about someone stealing his donkey. It's not his donkey. The real owner is pointing at an ear notch as proof. A clay tablet is presented. Everyone yells, and the scribe jots down another complaint while chewing dates like this is a soap opera. To make things worse, temple guards patrol the square. Their job is to maintain order and occasionally remind you that you are very much not in charge of anything. One scowls at you. You smile awkwardly. He spits near your foot. You duck into a corner shop where you can maybe pay a scribe's apprentice to write a formal petition. He agrees, but only after you loan him your sandals as collateral. While he presses the stylus, you realize you can't even read what he's writing. Only the elite, the priests, and certain bureaucrats learn cuneiform. You could be petitioning for more debt, for all you know. You exit the shop, barefoot, holding a squishy clay rectangle with mystery symbols and the lingering scent of goat fat. By now, the sun has climbed high again, and your soles are burning. You hop from shady patch to shady patch like a desperate lizard. Quirky fact, some Babylonian contracts were inscribed inside hollow clay shells. If the outer tablet was tampered with, you could crack it open in court to show the real deal hidden inside. It's the ancient version of password-protected PDFs, except heavier and occasionally lethal if dropped on your foot. You finally arrive at a lesser temple to file your petition. The priest in charge looks at your clay with the tired eyes of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. He accepts it with a grunt, tosses it on a pile, and says, "Come back in 5 days." You ask for a receipt. He laughs until he starts coughing. You wander outside, dazed by the sheer inertia of Babylonian bureaucracy. You came in to prove you paid your barley. You're leaving with no sandals, twice the debt, and 3 new mosquito bites. And you've still got to make it home without getting mistaken for a runaway servant. By now the streets are even more congested than before. Temple workers shout over merchants. Scribes argue over tablets. A goat is standing on a cart like it owns the place. And you're just one more face in the clay-covered crowd, clutching the ancient equivalent of a form you're pretty sure no one will read. As you limp past the canal, a child runs by screaming something about a snake in the water. You don't even blink anymore. You step over a sleeping man, avoid a woman flinging wash water from a rooftop, and dodge a boy selling stale fish. Your feet are blistering, your patience is shredded, and your soul feels like it's been slowly filed down with a bronze chisel. Modern minds tend to romanticize ancient civilizations. Babylon, with its hanging gardens and clever astronomers, is often painted as a land of genius and grandeur. And sure, the upper classes had astronomers and palm wine, but you just wanted to prove you paid your taxes. And instead, you've entered a Kafkaesque maze, carved in mud brick, and written in a language only 12 people understand. You crawl into your home just before sunset. You've still got tomorrow's labor shift ahead. But for now, you close your eyes and dream of soft sandals, faster lines, And maybe dust, maybe a world where the paperwork doesn't literally weigh 3 pounds. It's barely dawn, and your back already feels like it's been trampled by an angry ox. That would almost be an improvement over what today has in store. Your job, let's be honest, whatever occupation you've got in Babylon, it's going to hurt a lot. Unless you were born into a priestly or scribal family, chances are your daily grind includes heavy lifting, inhaling something toxic, or working under someone who thinks human dignity is a new kind of grain. You're assigned to the kill district, and the air already smells like scorched earth and bad decisions. You've been loaned out by the temple to work with the brick-making crew until your grain debt is paid. Fun fact, Babylon was built brick by brick, millions of them, sun-dried or fired in roaring furnaces that could melt your eyebrows. You arrive at the brickyard, where clay pits yawn like open wounds in the ground. You're handed a crude wooden shovel and told to mix mud, straw, and water with your bare hands. The straw keeps the bricks from cracking as they dry, the blisters forming on your fingers. That's just extra texture. After molding each brick, you carefully carry them to the firing area, where heat rolls out in shimmering waves that make your vision blur. You're sweating like a fish in a frying pan, and you haven't even lifted anything yet. Then the foreman points to a cart of dried bricks ready for the kill. You sigh, lift one, and your spine makes a sound like dry twigs snapping. Historians estimate that most manual laborers in Mesopotamia worked 12 to 14 hours a day, especially during major temple or canal construction seasons. No weekends, no sick days. If you collapsed, someone else stepped in, then maybe looted your sandals. You pass out by mid-morning and wake to someone throwing a damp cloth on your face. Not dead. Good get up, says the foreman. You groan and keep going, because what's the alternative? Starve. There's no safety net in Babylon. You're one bad shift from joining the crowd of beggars lining the ziggurat steps. And speaking of safety, here's a fun Babylonian workplace quirk. You're barefoot, surrounded by sharp tools, and working next to an open fire. Oh, and the guy next to you is melting copper for a part order. His technique: pouring molten metal into sand molds while humming off. He's missing 3 fingers. Historians still argue whether these conditions were considered normal or brutal by Babylonian standards. Either way, you're not allowed to complain. Complaining implies that your station in life could be different-hand in a society where the gods assigned your role. That's practically heresy. By midday, you've inhaled so much smoke, clay dust, and straw fibers that your lungs feel like baked porridge. Your hands are cracked, bleeding at the knuckles, and the only thing you've had to drink is warm water from a shared jar that also doubles as a bed. Still, at least you're not working the canal crews. Those poor souls spend their days knee-deep in mosquito-infested irrigation trenches, trying to keep Babylon from flooding or drying out completely. You once saw a guy get bitten by something in the canal, and he spent 3 days hallucinating before falling face-first into his own barley pot. But hey, maybe you'll get lucky and learn a trade. Blacksmith, if you can handle the heat and noise. Leatherworker, if you don't mind the smell. Or maybe you'll become one of those itinerant musicians who play a 10-string lyre and hope someone tips them with dried fruit. You overhear 2 workers talking about a merchant who lost his son in a brick kiln collapse last week. No one was punished. Bricks were more valuable than the people making them. Quirky fact: Babylonian law codes, like hammer, often prescribed fines for destroying property but said surprisingly little about protecting workers. They were high-ranking, or as the sun begins to dip, your limbs feel like they've been filled with wet sand. You can't tell if your tunic is soaked with sweat or river water or both. The foreman dismisses the crew by shouting something about turning up earlier tomorrow. You nod like you agree, even though you have no idea what time you'll be able to move again. You shuffle toward your living quarters, if you can even call it that, passing the sacred district where well-dressed priests fan themselves with peacock feathers. One of them sips something chilled from a ceramic jar. Chilled. You consider selling your soul for a handful of ice. By the time you reach your alley, the sky has cooled, but the walls still radiate heat like tired stoves. You crawl inside, flop onto your mat of reeds and old sackcloth, and stare at the ceiling, wondering if your fingers will still work tomorrow. No wonder Babylonians believed in a detailed afterlife. Living was already so punishing, what came after had to be better. Or at least, it had to come with shoes. You wake up scratching. Again, something bit you during the night, or maybe several somethings. Your mat is full of straw mites. Your wall is crawling with ants. And the open window invited a friendly mosquito orchestra to feast on you like a half-conscious buffet. Welcome to hygiene in ancient Babylon. Today you've decided to visit the public baths, not because you're feeling particularly fancy, but because the itch between your toes is starting to feel suspiciously sentient. You gather a small cloth, some old oil, and whatever dignity you have left, and make your way through the winding alleys toward the communal wash house. Bathhouses in Babylon weren't exactly Roman spas. Picture a sun-baked courtyard with cracked tiles, a few large ceramic vats of warm water, and zero privacy. Still, for most commoners, it's the only place to wash more than just your hands and regrets. You step in, nod at the other bathers, mostly older men with back hair and opinion sands, start scrubbing. You pour oil over your body first, then scrape it off with a dull bronze strip. It's not pleasant, but it gets some of the grime off. The water's lukewarm, cloudy, and slightly greenish. A child next to you blows bubbles with a reed straw, and then proceeds to drink from the bath. You look away. Historians still argue whether these communal washing practices genuinely helped reduce disease or just moved bacteria around in more social ways. What we do know, ancient Babylon was a breeding ground for pests. Lice, ticks, fleas, intestinal worms, you name it. Sanitation was relative, and the street gutters doubled as public sewers. Quirky tidbit: some Babylonians believed wearing a certain kind of clay amulet could protect them from fever demons. You haven't found one yet, but you're seriously considering crafting one out of yesterday's leftover porridge. As you dry off with a cloth that smells like someone else's sadness, a loud shout echoes from outside. Another street fight. You peek through the wall slats and see two men arguing over a stolen goat, or perhaps a borrowed goat that didn't come back. Either way, the law is about to be involved, and you'd rather not be collateral. You make your way home, but not before stopping by a healer's hut. That toe itch hasn't improved. The healer examines it briefly, mutters something about bad spirits in the blood, and prescribes a mixture of honey, garlic, and burnt frog. You're told to rub it on the affected area while chanting a phrase about Ninazu, the god of healing. Is it science? Is it faith? You're not sure. Historians still debate how effective these Mesopotamian medical practices were, but judging by the smell of your new ointment, it's either going to work or scare the infection away. By mid-afternoon, the sun turns the city into a convection oven. The canal water, once cool and soothing, now smells like boiled algae and regret. You take a moment to crouch in what little shade the mud brick walls offer. A group of children runs past, laughing and chasing something. You look closer. It's a stray dog, and it's foaming at the mouth. You back away slowly. Rabies exists. So do curses. You're not sure which is worse. You reach your home and drink the last of your beer. In Babylon, even the children drank it, because the water could kill you faster. It's thick, cloudy, and tastes like someone brewed it in a boot, but it fills your belly and numbs your lingering aches. The sun begins to set, casting long shadows over the rooftop altars and ziggurat steps. A temple bell rings in the distance, signaling evening prayers. You say a quiet invocation to a minor household god, mostly out of habit, and try not to think about the strange rash forming on your left shoulder. Quirky fact: Babylonian households often had protective spirits or guards. They honored small figurines, tucked into corners, or buried under the threshold. They weren't just decorations. People genuinely believed these spirits kept away evil winds, bad dreams, and nosy neighbors. You lie down, stomach half full, skin still itching, the faint smell of garlic frog paste hovering in the air like a curse you can't escape. As you close your eyes, you wonder briefly how much worse things could possibly get. You'll find out tomorrow. Marriage contracts are involved. The morning starts with shouting, not temple shouting or foreman shouting. This is domestic shouting, and it's coming from your neighbor's courtyard. You peek through a gap in the wall and see two families gathered around a scribe holding a wet clay tablet. A woman is sobbing. A man is waving a sandal in the air for emphasis. There's only one possible explanation: a marriage contract dispute. See, in ancient Babylon, marriage wasn't just a celebration. It was a legally binding transaction involving property, family alliances, and enough clay documentation to pave a small road. Love, optional. Dowries, mandatory. And if either party tried to wriggle out after signing, things got ceremonially ugly. You remember your own family has been hinting that it's time for you to settle down. In Babylon, that doesn't mean choosing someone you like. It means someone your family can negotiate with. You're technically of age, which means the scribes have probably started adding your name to matchmaking wish lists, whether you like it or not. Later that morning, Your uncle drags you to a courtyard meeting with a man named Bozzy and his daughter. Ely, she's shy, barely speaks, and as clearly as thrilled about this as you are. Her father, on the other hand, is laying out a dowry list with the confidence of a man selling a prized goat. 3 wool tunics, a bronze cup, and partial ownership of a barley field near the city wall. Your family counters with a sheep, a jar of oil, and good character. Bozzy squints, unimpressed. A scribe records every word on a fresh clay slab, and a temple witness mutters a prayer to Ishtar. Congratulations, your betrothed. But here's where Babylonian marriage gets legally spicy. The tablet outlines everything. If you leave her without cause, you forfeit your goods. If she cheats, she could be thrown into the river or publicly shaved and paraded in disgrace. Romantic. Historians still argue whether these laws were actually enforced with regularity or just used as intimidation. Either way, they were terrifyingly specific. One clause even covers who keeps the livestock if the marriage ends over habitual laziness. Now comes the ceremony. No flowers or dancing, just handshakes, prayers, and a ceremonial meal, usually dried dates, stale bread, and lukewarm beer. The families feast together, not out of joy, but obligation. You try to chat with Ely, who responds with a grunt. You mention the weather. She glares harder. Quirky tidbit. In some cases, a Babylonian bride brought protective amulets to ward off jealous wives because polygamy was a thing. A man could take another wife if the first was infertile or ill. She couldn't object, legally. Later that evening, your newly inked marriage contract is read aloud by the same scribe who once misfiled your barley receipt. You smile politely while mentally reviewing everything you just legally agreed to. Spoiler, it's a lot. The clause about obedience to the household gods is ambiguous. Once the ink is dry, the gossip begins. Babylonian neighbors are unmatched in their ability to spread news. By dusk, 3 neighbors have congratulated you, to have criticized Ely's dowry as light, and one has asked whether she cooks with cumin or garlic important. Apparently, the next few days involve moving her into your tiny, clay-walled home. You clear a corner for her dowry chest. She brings her own mat, 2 clay figurines of healing deities, and a scowl that could curdle beer. The adjustment is ... rocky. You learn quickly that silence is Ely's love language. She says little, works efficiently, and glares at you only 60% of the time. On your 3rd night together, she hands you a bowl of soup without saying a word. It's awful, but you eat it. That's progress. One afternoon, she returns from the market and places something on the altar, an offering of dried dates wrapped in linen. You don't recognize the deity she's honoring, but you nod approvingly. She nods back. That's practically a hug in Babylon. Historians note that while many Babylonian marriages were arranged, some grew into affectionate partnerships. Still, affection didn't exempt anyone from the legal contracts that hovered like invisible referees over the entire union. One day, you overhear a friend panicking because his wife has accused him of conjuring spirits against her womb. A neighbor suggests a bribe. Another suggests hiding. You pat your clay tablet and thank the gods that Ely mostly ignores you. You end the week lying on your mat, listening to Ely mutter a quiet prayer in the corner. You're not sure who it's for. Maybe for patience, maybe for you. Either way, you don't interrupt. You just stare at the cracked ceiling and wonder if marriage gets easier, or if you'll end up in a river. Nightfall in Babylon doesn't bring peace. It brings a different kind of chaos. You'd think that after a day of sweating, laboring, and dodging bureaucracy, you'd be able to collapse into your mat and drift into unconsciousness. But no. As soon as the sun dips behind the ziggurat, the city changes its rhythm quieter, and far more dangerous. Tonight, you're heading out. Not because you want to, because your cousin still hasn't returned with a borrowed cart. And if that cart's not back by morning, you're liable for it. That's Babylonian law. If you vouch for someone and they disappear, it's your problem now. You step cautiously through the narrow, torchlit streets. The air is cooler, finally, but also thick with smells that seem louder in the dark overripe fruit. Damn clay, and the faint but ever-present reek of animal waste. Shadows stretch long and strange against the city walls. You pass a cluster of men huddled near a brazier, talking low. They pause to stare at you as you walk by. You keep your eyes down. You're not in a gang, a priesthood, or the city guard, which means you are, legally and practically, extremely rough. Historians still argue whether Babylonian night guards served more to protect citizens or intimidate them. There's evidence both ways. What's certain is this: if you encounter one after dark, you better have a reason for being outside, and ideally, a bribe. You turn a corner and nearly trip over a stray dog, knowing something suspiciously human-shaped. You don't check. You just move faster. Then, you hear it a sharp whistle. Then, another. It's a guard patrol. You duck behind a stack of ampery and hold your breath as two men in leather helmets pass, carrying torches and short staffs. They're arguing about someone who insulted the governor's son in the fish market. The accused might lose a hand, or a tongue. It depends on the moon phase. Quirky fact: Babylonian legal punishments varied based on your social rank. If a noblewoman slapped a slave, that was a fine. If a slave did the slapping, that could be execution. Equality, not really trending. You move again, more carefully now. A couple streets over, you pass a house where a widow is performing a private ritual. There's incense burning, and a clay tablet propped up with incantations carved into it. She chants in a whisper and tosses herbs into a flame. You pause. You've heard of this ritual banishment of spirits. Babylonians believed strongly in ghosts, especially vengeful ones. If someone died unjustly or without proper burial, their spirit could linger. They'd bring disease, misfortune, even madness. Every neighborhood had stories. Everyone knew someone who'd been touched by one. You remember a temple priest once explaining that nighttime was the hour of crossing when the veil between the living and dead was thinnest. That's why some people wore protective amulets to bed or smeared themselves with garlic oil. You didn't, and now you're regretting it. Somewhere down an alley, you hear something fall loudly, then silence. You don't investigate. If Babylon has taught you anything, it's that being curious after sunset is a shortcut to being a plot device in someone else's cautionary tale. You finally find your cousin. He's drunk, flat out, face down, surrounded by empty pottery. The cart is intact, but he's not moving. You poke him with a stick. He groans, mutters something about borrowing 2 goats, and goes back to unconsciousness. You sigh and drag the cart home yourself. Slowly, painfully, every creaky wheel sounds like a shout in the eerie quiet. You pass the Ishtar Gate again, beautiful even in the dim blue-glazed bricks, golden lions so majestic, it almost makes you forget the smell of sewage 2 steps away. By the time you get home, the stars are bright overhead, and your muscles feel like wet twine. Elise is asleep, one hand resting on her small clay goddess. You lie beside her, careful not to wake her, and stare at the ceiling again. You realize now why people are so devoted to their protective spirits. In Babylon, every night was a gamble. You could be robbed, cursed, arrested, bitten, or worse, forgotten. Life wasn't guaranteed, not even until sunrise. Still, you made it through another night. Barely. Dawn creeps in like a thief, painting the mud brick walls gold and orange, while your body protests. Every inch of movement. You wake with a dry mouth, a sore shoulder, and the faint memory of nearly being hexed, robbed, or eaten the night before. Just another Tuesday in Babylon. Today is Temple Day, not because you're especially religious in this city. Everyone is, or at least pretends to be, but because the gods are always watching. And when they're displeased, things tend to fall apart quickly. Crops fail, roofs collapse, or someone wakes up with boils in their armpits. Your wife, Ely, insists on accompanying you. She's been quiet all morning, methodically wrapping an offering bundle in linen. Bread, and a small clay figurine with wide eyes and a beard. She hands it to you without speaking, her expression unreadable as always. You both head toward the temple district, passing through the crowded bazaar, where fortune tellers whisper predictions in exchange for figs, and desperate mothers buy charms for colicky babies. A man in a goat mask dances through the street, chanting something about a flood. No one bats an eye. The temple looms up ahead, massive and humming with activity. Babylonian temples aren't quiet places of contemplation. They're financial centers, political hubs, and divine theaters all rolled into one. You enter through a grand courtyard, where a line of supplicants stands before a statue of Marduk, the chief deity. You place your offering at the base of the altar and whisper a short plea. No more fires, no more rats. Just a good harvest, and maybe a better roof. You're not asking for luxury, just less doom. Inside, priests bustle around in robes so clean they might as well be glowing. Their heads are shaved, their hands soft. One of them waves incense in rhythmic arcs, while another chants from a clay tablet. The sound reverberates like thunder inside your skull. Historians still argue whether these rituals were more ceremonial or magical, but one thing's certain. The people believed. Deeply. Desperately. Life in Babylon was too harsh not to. You make your way to a side room where a priestess of Ishtar offers personal blessings for a price. You hand over a small bronze trinket. She touches your forehead with an oil-soaked reed and mumbles a phrase about protection from impure winds. You have no idea what that means, but your neck does feel better. Quirky tidbit. Babylonians believed in evil winds, bad spiritual forces that traveled invisibly and caused illness, confusion, even madness. People used charms, incantations, and even household lizards to keep them away. As you leave the temple, you stop by a stall selling curse tablets. Yes, that's a thing. Clay squares where you can scratch the name of an enemy in a few choice threads. They're then buried under crossroads or thrown into rivers. You don't buy one, but you consider it. Maybe for the scribe who doubled your taxes, just hypothetically. Later, you pass a group of astrologers consulting the heavens. They've spread animal entrails over a slate and are reading omens in the shape of the liver. One of them looks concerned. Something about the moon being too close to Saturn, or not close enough. Either way, someone's about to have a bad week. You keep walking, eyeing the sky uneasily. Historians note that Babylonian astronomy was surprisingly advanced but often tangled with superstition. A lunar eclipse could shut down an entire temple for days. Mercury rising at dawn might trigger mass offerings of sheep. You once saw a man sacrifice a chicken because his shadow looked too short. Back home, Ely is scrubbing the floor with salt water and other protective ritual. She doesn't explain, and you don't ask. You just join her, splashing the threshold with a leftover brine. Not because you believe it will work, but because here, it might. That evening, a neighbor collapses outside his home. His wife insists it's a curse from a rival's god. The healer arrives and burns incense, while murmuring something about removing the shadow. You help hold the man's feet while they wrap him in damp linen and chant. He twitches, then snores. Everyone cheers. You realize how fragile everything is: life, reputation, your next meal. In Babylon, survival isn't just about food or work. It's about staying right with the gods. With all the gods. All 35 of them, plus local spirits, household deities, and a terrifying storm god who's always angry for some reason. That night, you place a fresh offering on your home altar. Half a date, and a clean pebble. It's not much, but it's sincere. You lie down beside Ely, who's humming softly to herself for the first time in weeks. You don't recognize the melody. Maybe it's a lullaby, or maybe it's a prayer. Either way, it's a sound that makes you feel just briefly like the gods might be smiling. You don't need an alarm in ancient Babylon. The rich wake up to harp music, the poor, you wake up to yelling, braying animals, and the familiar ache of having slept on a woven mat stuffed with straw and the dreams of better housing. Today is a market day, and while you're barely scraping by, the city's elite are floating on perfumed breezes. Literally. You catch your first whiff of imported incense, drifting from a silk curtain, carried by 4 sweating servants. Inside lounges a man in a gold-threaded robe, lazily chewing dried apricot, and pretending the street isn't made of cracked bricks and screaming vendors. This is Babylon's upper crust. Temple elites, wealthy merchants, royal officials. They don't step around donkey dung. Someone does it for them. You pull your tunic tighter and continue toward the market, trying not to trip over a pile of fish guts. On your way, you'll pass a garden so lush it might as well be a hallucination. Tall palms, carefully watered flowers, and a small canal with actual clean water winding through it. That's not public land, that's a noble's home. Probably the kind of person who watches lion fights for sport on weekends. Historians still argue whether the famous hanging gardens were real or just exaggerated propaganda, but rich Babylonians had gardens, terraces, pools, and sometimes even musicians on staff to entertain them while they digested roast goose and honey pastries. Meanwhile, your neighbor's roof just caved in. You enter the market, a maze of spices, textiles, baked goods, and lies. You can't afford most of what you see. A jar of sesame oil costs more than your monthly barley ration. But the rich, they buy it in bulk. You spot a noblewoman examining lapis lazuli beads, while a servant shades her with a linen parasol. Quirky fact: Babylonian nobles used real perfume, often stored in tiny carved alabaster jars. The common folk, you rely on aromatic smoke, and hoping you don't smell worse than the guy next to you. At the livestock pen, a merchant with oiled hair is selling purebred sheep to a man whose sandals cost more than your entire net worth. The man doesn't even haggle, just flicks a copper coin and walks off. cloak billowing. You watch him go. Then remember, you're here to trade a bundle of firewood for a handful of onions. As you barter, you hear laughter from the upper level of a two-story house, rare architecture, only for the rich. You glance up to see finely dressed people sipping something from ceramic cups while reclining on cushioned benches. They're watching a group of dancers perform. One of them throws a pomegranate to a child in the street. The child is too stunned to catch it. You walk past, clutching your onions, back aching, stomach grumbling. A servant with dyed curls passes by carrying a tray of figs and cheese. You make eye contact. He looks away. It's not envy that hits you, it's distance. These people don't live in the same Babylon. Their walls are painted, their beds have legs, their water is filtered. Your water has tadpoles in it. You finally reach home, drop the onions, and slump into your usual spot in the courtyard. Ellie joins you a moment later, wiping her hands on a cloth. She offers you a scrap of bread. You eat in silence. Then, you both hear it. Drums. A festival procession is moving through the street. You peek around the corner to see nobles on horseback, priests carrying icons, and veiled women tossing flower petals. Children rush to follow, laughing, hands outstretched. You're tempted to join, but you stay in your doorway, watching. You don't have the clothes for a parade, or the coins, or the patience to pretend like this version of Babylon is yours. Still, there's beauty. A streak of orange sky above the rooftops, the sound of lyres echoing through the temple plaza, the smell of cardamom and fresh honey pastries wafting downwind. For a moment, it almost feels like hope. Then, someone steps on your foot. You hiss, pull back, and realize it's a neighbor returning from the festival, drunk and jubilant, trailing petals and slurred blessings. He winks at you and stumbles on. You shake your head, sit back down, and lean into the wall. It's cracked. It always is. But it holds. And so do you. And the sounds of Babylon begin to fade. The temple bells quiet. The market stalls close, one by one, their shutters creaking in the warm dusk. The donkeys stop braying, the vendors stop shouting, and even the incense smoke curls a little slower as night settles in, like a heavy, familiar blanket. You lie on your mat against same spot, same sky overhead, filled with stars that shimmer through the faint dust of a city that never truly sleeps. Ely breathes quietly beside you, her clay goddess tucked beneath her arm. As always, you let your eyes trace the outline of the ceiling beams, worn but strong. Outside, a breeze stirs the palm leaves. A dog barks once, then falls silent. Somewhere far off, you hear a lullaby. Someone's child is being rocked to sleep in a cradle made of reeds and rope and hope. Maybe tomorrow will be easier. You think about the gods. You think about the rich. You think about how tired you are. How tired everyone is. But there's also something comforting in knowing that across the whole city, from the palace rooftops to the mud brick alleys, people are ending their day just like you, quiet, aching, and grateful to have made it through one more cycle of heat and dust and survival. The stars blur softly now. The world exhales. You let yourself drift slowly, gently into a sleep thick as river silt. You are safe, you are home, and you are not alone. Sweet dreams.